Ms. Stoltz, could you call the roll? Here.
Here.
Commissioner Appel? Commissioner Rico?
Here.
Commissioner Gibb-Randall? Here. Councilmember Bannister?
Here.
Commissioner Calvert?
Here.
Commissioner Graham?
Here.
Commissioner Slavic?
Here.
Commissioner Hanna? Oh, wait, Commissioner Hanna.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. Our first order of business is approving the agenda. Do I have a motion to do so?
So moved. Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Approval of minutes. We've got 2 meetings worth. The first is June 28th. Motion to approve the June 28th minutes.
So moved.
Second from Councilmember Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And minutes from our joint meeting with the Energy Commission on September 27th. We have a motion to approve those.
So moved.
I'll
Call that a
second it.
tie. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Next order of business is public commentary. Is anyone from the public here to speak to the commission this evening? Nope. There will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting should you choose to do so. Moving on, our new business, major item on the agenda tonight is amending our commission bylaws, and I believe someone from the city attorney's office is here to help with that.
Just give me a minute while I bring this up to height. So my name is Chris Frost, and I'm with the city attorney's office, and I handle bylaws for boards and commissions. So I spoke with staff. I understood you all were looking at the bylaws to make some changes. We have a standard template that we were directed by council to develop, and so I went through the bylaws as they are and put them in the current standard format. There's a couple of changes. Most of them are for clarity and consistency with this new format. Some of them are for consistency and compliance with other requirements, resolutions, and laws. And a couple of them were some items that were identified by the Commission for Change. And so I'm just going to run through these quickly, and then if there are any questions, I'll answer those. Just to remind everyone, we're not voting on these today. The bylaws are presented at one meeting, and then they're voted on at the subsequent meeting. So if there's any changes that need to be made, we can do that. So I provided red line copies, and I'm just going to go through that. The first main change is, issue rather, is section 3.2, which is the purposes of the body. I know that some folks had pointed out that there were some items in here that were out of date or moot. This is in the ordinance, unfortunately, so we can't change that. So we, without amending the ordinance. So we're just going to kind of have to do the best we can with what's here, and if something is moot, it's moot. The next changes are in Article 4 under membership. 4.1, these changes are just to comport with the language of the ordinance more closely, just to avoid any confusion. There's a section below that, 2 paragraphs, that I've commented that were moved to a different section. These are about committee appointments, and they are more properly in the committee section. Section 4.3 has a lot of red in it. Most of that is just removing something that's not really relevant about initial appointment staggering. Section 4.4, the charter requirement changed. You now have to be a registered elector at the time of appointment. Section 4.6, again, just for consistency with the code language, has changed. Article 5, the ethics and conflicts of interest section, removing some gendered language in there. Adding a section 5.9, which is new, pertaining to commissioners appearing before the commission or on behalf of a petitioner before the commission. The idea here is that The commission shouldn't be influenced by a commissioner standing up to advocate for someone who's appearing before the commission on a matter they might be voting on. Section 510, just clarifying that commissioners should go through the staff liaison when they have a question or an issue that they want to communicate with the city on. Just keeps that point of contact consistent so everybody's on the same page and has the same information.
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
that point? So, I understand the intent, but it seems rather sweeping, so can you kind of unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, so, for example, if you had a matter before you that maybe had some planning implications and you think, oh, I should talk to someone in planning, the temptation might be to pick up the phone, talk to the planning staff, then the staff liaison maybe doesn't know what's happening, maybe the other commissioners don't get the information. It's just to kind of funnel it through a single point of contact. And the language allows for different contacts, direct contacts, if it's expedient. So if there was an ongoing project or something, you needed to have ongoing communication. It's just more of a reminder that the staff liaison is really the point of contact that you want to be going through in order to keep everybody in the loop, because the staff liaison ultimately is responsible for your agendas and keeping track of your work plan and all that sort of thing.
I did wonder about that, too. I mean, in practical terms, if we're going to email the staff liaison, does that mean we should refrain from CCing other people who may be involved
No,
and leave that to them?
Just as
or-
long as you're copying the staff
Okay.
liaison, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are the liaison and sit on the commission, like myself, how does that work?
So this is for the city staff liaison. That would be Missy
Right,
or
but if
Emily.
I'm on planning commission and I'm here and
Yeah.
I'm speaking about.
Yeah,
like,
no, that's fine.
So-
It's really just if you're,
Somebody shouldn't contact me even though I'm on both?
yeah, the term staff liaison here is
Yeah,
used
right, you
strictly
mean
in that.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I'm, but I'm a liaison from another commission.
Right.
So, in other words, if I'm wearing my planning commission hat because I know what the project is about, I can speak during the meetings, but offline, it needs to go through staff.
Well, no, not necessarily. If you're speaking to another commissioner, you mean, about
Yeah,
something?
if somebody from environmental commission knows that I've been
Yeah.
reviewing something on planning commission,
Yeah, that's fine.
but I'm on both, that's okay for them to talk to me.
Yeah, it's just when speaking to city staff.
But they're
So-
not supposed to contact another planning commissioner, though, is what you're saying, too. It should go through staff to be able to go to the planning commission.
For commission-to-commission contact, this wouldn't apply to that. This is
Okay.
just for city staff contact.
Okay,
Can I just, maybe going too far, but as I read this, if you take it in its broadest interpretation, I would feel more comfortable if it said something related to work of the commission. As this is written, unless I'm misreading it, it's,
Oh,
I
that's a good
can't
point.
contact the city.
Yeah, we can add that, for sure.
Okay.
That is the intent.
That's a great point.
Can I follow up another
Yeah.
item related to this? I think you said that it's permissible to contact someone on city staff when I, at the same time, CC the staff liaison. This says that I have to do it through the liaison. To me, copying them and going through them are two different things.
Yes, I mean, really, it's also through is the correct term. I don't think there would necessarily be an objection. There may be a case if there's a lot of volume, and a certain staff member, might be busy. It's also to control staff time.
Yeah,
just
sure,
to
I
keep the
understand the
floodgate.
rationale, right.
So through is really correct. The CCing it's more of a convenience that I think everyone's okay
So
with. it.
CC is permissible then?
Is common practice.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, good. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions on that? 511, just adding, imploring people to be civil and respectful, since these days, the political situation doesn't seem to take that into account very much.
No bombs, please.
At least in our little corner of the world, we'd like it to remain civil. Moving to the next section, mostly, again, just minor tweaks, clarifications. Under the section 6.1, the election for officers was scheduled in September. I understand that maybe not when you do it. So we've just taken that out, and it's just annual now, so whenever it occurs to you is the best time to do it, you can do it annually. Section 7.2 moved a little bit of the special meeting discussion down to another section where it is in the standard form. Sections 7.4 and 7.6 just rearranged it a little bit and rephrased it for compliance with our open meetings resolution and consistency with the standard form. Section 7.8 about the quorum, this appeared that it was somewhat backwards in that it required only a majority of members serving for the quorum, but then required a minimum of 7 to pass anything. So, you know, conceptually, you could have 5 people serving, have a quorum, but not be able to do anything. So we reversed it, which is the more usual, which is a majority of the members to have the meeting, and then a majority of those actually present to pass something. If that makes sense to everybody.
That'd be easier.
Yeah. Section 7.9 clarifies, and that's just consistency with the standard bylaws, that roll call votes are not required, but may be requested if it's not unanimous. Section 7.10 just simplified it down. We now have a policy, administrative policy on minute keeping, and so all of that is handled in the policy, and it's really the staff liaison's responsibility more so than the commission's. Moving all the way down to committees, section 9.5, that's where that language was added as part of the standard bylaws. Before creating a committee, just check with staff. We have had some instances where commissions get very enthusiastic and want to create multiple committees, and then there's an issue with scheduling them with rooms, staff resources, and all of that, because we do have a resolution that requires they be done in compliance with Section 3 of the Open Meetings Act. So this is just to have the commission check. Since this body has been in existence for a while, I don't anticipate that being an issue. You probably know how to handle that. And then lastly, in the miscellaneous section, 12.1, just correcting or updating the reference to the Office of Sustainability and Innovations as the staff liaison. So that is the 5 to 10 minute version. Are there any questions at all on this, or desires for changes?
I just want to be clear. So the bylaws are solely adopted by us as a body, or does the council also sign off on them, or?
Yes, there's a council resolution, so you consider it, put what you like in there with the guidance of our office. Once you've approved it, it goes to city council, and then it takes effect once city council approves it.
Okay. And the points that you say are outdated but are included in the ordinance, by that ordinance, are you referring to the ordinance that established the commission in the first place?
Yes.
The charter, is that known as the charter, or?
It's an ordinance.
It's an ordinance.
It is in
Okay.
city code. It's part of the city code.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, and if you have any questions in the meantime, before the next meeting, if anything comes up, feel free to email me, and I will get you an answer.
So is this a house cleaning you're going through with all commissions bylaws?
We do them as they come up, but yes, every commission that comes through gets put on the standard
Comes
form.
through what?
Comes through our office,
Your office is?
for the city attorney's office, for
How?
bylaw revision.
And was there some stimulating event that caused our bylaws to come through your office?
I think we had a change in staff, and they were looking at them and we realized actually they had never been adopted by council the last time.
Our bylaws have never been?
Correct.
Great.
So that was kind of what set it off. They had been redone not that long ago, so there aren't too many changes.
Very good.
So I have a question that's not part of the revision. It's 7.5. It states that meeting announcements are posted at City Hall.
Yes.
I don't know if there's an online option as well, or if that's
Yeah,
listed
we also
somewhere.
have it online. This is just referring to the physical location. A couple of boards and commissions meet at CTN, for example, so they would have their meetings posted there. But we do also post them online. Yeah.
Okay.
Would it be worth including and online?
We could, it's a state law requirement for the Open Meetings Act, so it's not really necessary. Where you post it physically depends on where you're meeting.
Right.
So that's just to clarify for the individual boards, and for most at City Hall. But
Any other questions?
Got it.
Great, thanks a lot, I appreciate the work, and this will be back before us at our next meeting for consideration of action. The next thing on the agenda is a resolution supporting some state legislation dealing with recycling and brownfield mitigation. And this is coming to us from our newest commissioner, Stephen Brown. Would you like to explain a bit about this, please?
Yeah, I first became aware of this personally through an article in the media, I think it was Bridge Magazine, back in January or February, where Rick Snyder had announced that he wanted to provide some more money for recycling and to raise the tipping fees, in the state, which, as you can see in the document, are very low. And so the next event that I was aware of was that Mike Knopf's, Senator Mike Knopf's, submitted this legislation as it's written on April 17th of this year. So my understanding, I heard recently that that it's going to be considered in the lame duck session after the election in a couple of weeks. So I thought it might be a good time to apprise the council of this. I'm not sure if that's appropriate or not, but it seemed like an important thing to, let both the council and the staff know about if they weren't aware of it already. And and I've heard that it would help get this passed if there was support from various local governments that was expressed to the state legislature. So that was my motivation. Let's see, are there any questions about it?
I know there were a couple late changes to the draft language suggested. Is that reflected?
Yeah, that's correct. No, these are not incorporated in this document. So I can, that's the next thing I wanted to talk about. So, I'm grateful to city staff who on short notice were able to look over this resolution draft and made some suggestions that I thought were entirely appropriate. And because I just drafted this last weekend. So the first change was on, should I just do this orally? Yeah.
Is that acceptable? I think so, yeah.
Okay. So the first change is on whereas number 4, where I've crossed out the language on this printout, and I wanted to replace it with whereas, based on current tonnages from the city, the increased fee will cost the city solid waste fund a minimum of $225,000 per year, but will fund increased opportunities for residents and businesses to recycle more. Now, this is an upper bound, because clearly, if statewide the tipping fees are increasing, that's going to promote more behavior to minimize throwing things into the landfills. And the basic idea of the legislation is to use these increased fees, earmark them more or less for both brownfield mitigation and to enhance recycling within local governments in the state. And so the language around that is fairly general as it's written at this point. But it could be for planning purposes, it could be for helping start new recycling enterprises, new methods, things like that.
And was that the only text change?
No. Whereas number 8, I wanted to strike out the existing language and suggest whereas the city of Ann Arbor could potentially receive grant or loan funding in the future for programs through the state of Michigan, which are anticipated to include facilitation of solid waste management plans and promotion of recycling in general.
Okay, so with those text changes, if we have a motion to approve, we can then get into a discussion. Do we have a motion to approve?
Yes,
Or a motion to consider, sorry.
so moved.
Second.
Thanks. Any discussion?
Commissioner Brown, the original version of this in the governor's thinking was some portion of it, maybe 5 million, would go to state parks. Is that gone? Do you know?
I have not noticed that language so far. Yeah.
Our tipping fees are absurdly low. It's completely ridiculous. We're getting trash from Toronto coming to Michigan and big, huge trucks up and down 401. It's nuts. And meanwhile, even if it's not state parks, the benefit to the state from the increased fees, which aren't exorbitant, are likely to be very significant. And meanwhile, our landfills fill up a lot more slowly. Good incentive in the right direction.
Other discussion?
I didn't get the language of the changes exactly, and at least for me, I would like to know the exact language before I vote on it. So if you could, at some point, repeat the new language for whereas number 4 as well as whereas number 8, that would be appreciated.
Sure. So whereas number 4 is now, whereas based on current tonnages, the increased fee will cost the city solid waste fund a minimum of $225,000 per year, but will fund increased opportunities for residents and businesses to recycle more.
I didn't get it all, but can you repeat it, or someone else? Do you ever repeat it?
Oh. Is it more solid?
Whereas, based on current tonnages, the increased fee will cost the city solid waste fund a minimum of $225,000 per year, but will fund increased opportunities for residents and businesses to recycle more.
Got it. And the question that I would then ask, I guess, Steve, is that true? Does the additional money that the city will pay go in, it does not flow directly back to the city?
No, it does not.
Right.
No, the city has to apply as a
Right.
grant.
Okay. I don't know if the language made that clear. It provides an opportunity for, I guess, is what the language said, right? So that, in principle, is okay, I guess. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for the clarification.
Yep. And then can you repeat
Yeah.
the change to whereas number 8? That's the
Right.
bottom of the first, of the page 1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd strike the current language, and whereas the city of Ann Arbor could potentially receive grant or loan funding in the future for programs through the state of Michigan, which are anticipated to include facilitation of solid waste management plans and promotion of recycling in general.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
I have a couple of other questions.
Yeah.
This is your language. Did this come from a template from any other municipality that is also in support of this? Or did it come from an NGO that is
Oh, yes.
driving this? Or is this basically your language that you put together?
The template originally came from the Michigan Recycling Coalition,
Okay.
which is an umbrella organization for recycling organizations around the state. So I checked the figures against what I knew, and I changed the language a little bit based on my reading of the, of the current drafts of SB 943 and the Part 115. They're a couple of hundred pages long, so I haven't had time to review them completely.
Right.
And certainly not from a legal point of view. And then I presented the draft that I'd first completed on the weekend to Kristen Hayden, and he'd had a chance to review it for a couple of hours and made these suggested changes for whereas number 4 and number 8.
And are you familiar or are you aware if other municipalities have adopted similar resolutions, either based on the template that you originally got from the recycling organization that you mentioned, or based on something that they did on their own? Are you
I'm not sure if they've been adopted as yet, but I know that several counties have also submitted similar resolutions. Emmett County in particular, which is around Petoskey,
right?
and some other county, I've forgotten which one.
Well, the reason for my last question was, I think Steve knows this, in the Energy Commission, we originated 2 resolutions in support of House bills that relate to alternative and solar energy, and those were then ultimately passed by council. And the good thing is that those are being used as templates for other entities in Michigan to also create and approve similar resolutions. So it's not just us in Ann Arbor that are doing this. In the case of the ones that we originated, Detroit, Ypsilanti, Grand Rapids have also all approved already those resolutions, and we're working through, in that case, because it's energy related and climate related, we're working through the Michigan Climate Action Network to contact other municipalities to use what Ann Arbor has done along with the other ones to pass similar resolutions. So the idea is that we want to build support across the state for these kinds of initiatives, and I think the same thing would apply here, and that would make sense in this case, that we, if indeed this is passed by us and supported by council, that we would do the same thing to try to get this out through other organizations to build support.
Go state parks.
So with whereas number 4, I'm just curious, it's pretty different than what the original one was, and I'm just curious if that $444 per household is actually accurate-ish, or is it because it's a total shift in terms of how you're quantifying things? So I'm just curious if that is going to be sort of the average cost, or is it based on how many, how often you put your garbage out on the street or anything like that? Do you have any sense of how this is operationalized?
Well, I'd used some rather older figures of how much tonnage the city puts in the landfill every year. And then I divided it by the number of residents in Ann Arbor households. So that was just a rough calculation. Kristen Hayden suggested a change in this language because he added up, he calculated it pretty much similarly by just using current figures for the tonnage. And the fact that the fees would go from 47 cents a ton to $4.44 a ton.
Because you don't do it per household in your new language, correct? You do
That's
it more
correct.
as the city, which would be paying this to the state, and then we would get back, potential money for programs and things like that. So basically, our tax bills will go up slightly in order to be able to accommodate this.
No,
Is
the
that
tax
true or
bills would
no?
not be affected.
Not be
No,
affected?
no. The money's coming from the solid waste millage
I see.
that pays for the solid waste.
Okay, so that's why you're
disposal.
keeping it away from a per household.
Yeah, that's
kind of- I
correct.
see, got it.
That's correct. It
Okay.
might introduce a misunderstanding.
Okay,
Yeah.
If it's okay, maybe I can provide some clarity
Sure.
on the financial side. So I sent commissioners a summary of the solid waste expenditures, and we're supposed to get, as I was informed by Kristen, an update. He was originally intending or hoping to come tonight and provide some explanation, but he's traveling, so that'll be at our next meeting. But if you look at expenditures over the last several years, let's say after the MRF shut down, our total expenditures in fiscal year 17 were 18.1 million. Last year, they were 16.2 million. So if you take the 200 and some $1,000, that's a third significant digit change to the total expenditures that we're talking about. And last year, in fiscal year 17, there was, in fiscal year 17, there were a bunch of extraordinary charges because the MRF shut down and things like that. But last year, revenues were 16.7 million, Normal operating expenses were 16.2 million. So if you were to add 200 and some $1,000, that would roughly balance out and would not affect the overall fund balance. But as Steve mentioned, if there were to be an impact in a difference between expenditures and revenues, that would eat into the total fund that is right now. And last year, it ended at 9.5 million, and the budget for this year projects it ending at $9 million. So there's a substantial buffer there. To put that, though, into broader context, in fiscal year 15, the unrestricted fund balance was $5 million. So it's eroded significantly. Most of that was due to some pension-related one-time write-offs. One of those was $3.1 million. I don't know if that helps, hopefully. So basically what I'm trying to say is $200,000 in the big scheme of things is not all that significant. And if you look at the projections, or last year and the projections from this year, where revenues and expenditures more or less balance out, it's not like we're throwing that completely out of kilter.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on process, and particularly interested in terms of when this has been done before. When's the right time for us to show a sign of support for this? My understanding, it's been referred to committee, perhaps might change. So when this has been done before, do you know when it was done in the legislative process?
I don't know that there's necessarily a right or wrong time. I don't frankly know how much influence it has, but I think.
Just that it's potentially a moving target.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, that's why when I drafted this, I didn't really mention SB 943 or Part 115, because of course, who knows what the final product will be. So this is why I wrote the language, is just supportive of the governor's suggestion to raise the tipping fees, but then providing a fund for financing, planning for recycling, and promoting businesses, local businesses, things like that. These are the kind of things that have been spoken about.
Looks like it's been in committee since last April.
In the case of the energy bills that I mentioned, we stepped in one case after they had passed the House and were pending action in the Senate. In the other case, the bills had been drafted and been considered in the House, but had not yet been passed by the House. So the same situation was in the second case of the energy bills. We endorsed something that had yet to formally even pass one of the legislatures at the state level.
Yeah, I guess, for me, the short answer is we do it whenever we're able to, only meeting once a month at most.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other discussion?
I think a lot will happen in Lame Duck. It's probably worth our agreeing to this resolution if we care about it.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That takes us to reports. We'll start with committee reports if we have any, which I suspect we do not. Is that accurate? All right. Our commission liaisons, Commissioner Gibrandel, planning, anything?
Yeah. A few months ago, we tabled our first project because of the dioxane plume. It's a little controversial because there's a lot of projects that are in the dioxane plume. So it's a little hard to know where we draw the line with that. And I think that we're going to be learning along the way. And the petitioner was going to go back and do some further testing. Subsurface, it's very close to the original, site. So a little bit unusual in that way. So it will be interesting to see how that all unfolds over time as this thing spreads around, and really at some point, a lot of the city's going to be over the dioxane plume.
So the issue is the contamination is close enough to the surface that there might be some sort of air.
The issue is that our stormwater ordinance requires infiltration. And if we are promoting water infiltration, are we speeding up the process of the dioxin moving?
Oh, gosh.
So,
that's
yeah, right,
complicated.
I know, it makes your head hurt. So it's not at the surface. And there's some pretty good guesses about how deep it is and things like that, but we don't really know. And so it's just the first that it's come up, and it seemed like it is something that we should all be aware of as well, and to see how those things interface, and that it's just going to evolve over time, I think. And again, I think this case is a little bit specific because it's so close. It's probably, I don't know, maybe a half mile from the original site. So 3/4, like as the crow flies, over near the Sister Lakes.
So presumably infiltration, adding water to the plume would dilute it.
It
So
could
you're
also
worried about
push it
pushing
in
the
other
plume
directions.
faster.
Yeah, exactly. That's what, yeah. So I know, it's, because I do a lot of work with stormwater, so it's like, wow, really? So we just want to just dump all the stormwater in the river instead, I mean, it really feels like not very hopeful. But I do think that this is kind of a unique situation, too, in terms of its proximity to the original site. So we'll see what happens, but I just thought you all might be interested to know that has taken place at the Planning Commission level. The other piece is that I was able to bring up some of the good works that's been done on metrics, actually, because we did a working session with the new development that's going to be hoping to take place behind the existing train station near the Broadway Bridge. And there's going to be a park near the water, and they had these
That's
wonderful.
the DTE property?
This is the DTE property, correct. And it was a big brownfield that there's actually, most of it's been cleaned up. There's one section that still needs to be cleaned up, but they had all these wonderful renderings of, the big stone steps going down into the water, and I was just thinking, that's after the Allen Creek dumps into the river there, and the Cascades is just above, where that is. And we had that really interesting report on all of our metrics and being able to see what all the different creeks are, how they're rated, and Allen was a very distinctive, different shade than everything else was. And so I brought it up, but more as a spur to get us to do something about Allen Creek rather than saying, nobody get in the water ever, But I do think that it's something that it's really one of those out of sight, out of mind kinds of creeks that we have. There's only one place where it comes to the surface, and that's in the middle of a private golf course. So, it would be tragic to me that we don't encourage people to be able to get their feet wet because of that. And so I'm hoping that we can continue to be able to encourage the city to do things to make it healthier so that we can put our feet in and feel okay about it. So.
Sorry, I was rousing, I'm sorry. I was rousing in the. Are you saying there's dioxin coming out of the outfall?
No, I'm not talking about dioxin. Totally different topic. This is a few
Water
months ago.
quality measures?
Yes, this is a few weeks ago when we had our metrics. I don't think that I'm sure that, in fact, we did talk a little bit about point source pollution, but I think that was really not the thrust of the metrics, because I don't think they've done the kind of expensive testing, frankly, that would need to happen on all the creeks with all of the various chemicals that are out there. So this, I don't know, probably 15 different categories of things that they were looking at.
You'll hear the Watershed Council,
Yeah.
12 different categories.
Was it 12? Yeah.
Well, up to 12. It varies by creek shed.
Sure.
And I think the rating for Allen was 5 out of 100. Everything else, every other creek shed was 50 or above, and that brought the overall weighted average down for Ann Arbor, within Ann Arbor, to 30. Those are the
Yeah.
numbers that I have in my head. And that's what she's referring to, is that if we were to have this development all right along the water, right at a point below where Allen Creek Shed is coming into the Huron River with a rating of 5, that sort of is problematic.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people understand how sprawling Allen Creek's watershed is and how much of the city it drains. I
Yeah.
mean, it goes from Burns Park on the east, way up to Stadium Road on the west,
Yeah.
and way down to what? Almost Ellsworth on the south.
Right, most
I
of
mean, It's
downtown.
a really big watershed, and it's
Yeah.
all urban.
Yeah.
Where is the point where it comes to the surface? I didn't.
It is at the Argo Dam. If you're crossing the dam.
Right, but you said on a
you-
golf course, it's.
Oh, where it comes to the surface?
Yeah.
Oh, that is in the middle of the golf course, Ann Arbor Golf and Outing, across from the stadium. There is one place where it comes out to the surface there. Otherwise, the headwaters are under the Pioneer parking lot, so,
Well,
yeah,
much
or
farther
part of that,
south than
a portion of the headwaters are there. And when they redid that big stormwater, the big treatment area, then remember when Pioneer was all ripped up, you could actually see the old clay seams of where the water would have been at the surface before it was all filled in with the fill that came out of the stadium. So pretty interesting to see that brief little window there when everything was opened up. So yeah, it's at that, and the golf course there. So not very many people get to see what the actual water of Allen Creek looks like
I
before it
haven't
hits the Huron
forgiven
River.
Ann Arbor Golf and Outing for filling in the creek there. Still haven't. Made that
Yeah.
golf course exciting. It's gone.
So anyway, I hope that it can be a way for us to spur further action on what happens with Allen Creek, because it is suffering in a lot of ways, and there's a place where I cross it every day in West Park, and I'd say 50% of the time I smell gasoline coming straight out of it. There's just a lot of illicit connections, I think, that are old and there, and, you know, it's just one of those, like, sad city creek stories. But I think each time new things happen, then all those connections get checked, and I know there were quite a few scary things when they redid the Y. There were some serious connections there that were bad news, and that they got fixed, you know, so we continue to unearth some of those old unhealthy relationships with the creek, but they're still there too, and I just hope that with this possibility of people being able to have contact with the river, that it spurs us to be able to take further action on making sure that it's something that we feel good about getting our bodies into, so. Yeah,
There might be an action step of some kind in here, because this particular Broadway Park development is in Ward 1. And we're, in general, the neighborhood has been happy with
Right.
the development of it. We are aware that there used to be gasification of coal
right,
in the ground. And so several environmentalists are worried about that. And so this is an addition to that concern. Now, the developer, we don't want to scare this developer away or make it difficult for them. And I think their position, if I could paraphrase, was that if we pass them DEQ, that's good enough for us, and we'll proceed. But the action step might be that what you're saying dovetails with the gasification, the bad ground there too.
It's more, it doesn't have anything to do with the on-site contamination. It has to do with everybody else upstream that is, you know, dumping paint into their catch basins and things like that. It's the water that's flowing off of our streets and the stormwater connections to the creek upstream.
Okay.
That's the problem. This developer has zero to do with this. It's just that it happens to be a few hundred feet downstream of where this flows right into the Huron River. So this has nothing to do with the site itself, other than they would love to be able to have recreation opportunities for people to be able to get down and put their feet in the water, much like the place in the Arb where, you know, the big stone steps go, and people aren't swimming, but, you know, they're putting their toes in, and kids are kind of splashing around a little bit, and it's like a nice place to be able to, you know, have a little contact. And so again, this has nothing to do with the developer at all. It really has to do with us taking more responsibility for what's happening upstream of this developer. I would hate to see them pulling back these opportunities to be able to interact with the river. I think that would be tragic. I think the onus is on us, and those of us who you know, are part of the Allen Creek. I live in it, you know, that we really try to fix the places that are messed up and make it something, so it, I mean, that's quite a, I didn't remember the specific numbers, like, that's quite a skewed, I mean, that's a, I do remember the colors on that sheet, and it was a totally different category, Allen Creek was. So, again,
The only thing
I
that
think
it
this
scored
doesn't.
good on was the temperature was cold.
Because
And
it was
that's why
all
it scored
underground.
5.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything else is basically
Right.
0. And so, yeah,
Right.
it's not a healthy creature.
Yeah. So I don't think this necessarily scares the developer away, and it has nothing to do with their behavior or their design whatsoever. It's more that I want it to be a reminder and a spur for us to be able to take on, you know, which we've done in little fits and starts, but I just think that this is a way for us to maybe, to face it a little more fully, and think about it as an opportunity to be able to get our act together.
Yes, I would agree. And I think this does dovetail with, while everyone's talking about the new park there, too.
Exactly. That's right.
So it's on people's minds, and so is there any, this came about, if there's anything you could send me for follow-up or something, I could have that in the file.
And it might be, you know, I don't know, again, that it's going to change how they handle their site plan submission.
Yeah.
Because it really, they have zero responsibility with this. It's really all the rest of us that are contributing to the stormwater in this area. It's all upstream. They just happen to be the first ones out of the gate of where this water comes and hits the sun again after being underground for miles and miles and miles. So, in some ways, I think it's almost thinking about how we can interface with other initiatives that are happening within the city so that we can focus our attention on how we can try to improve the water quality of Allen Creek so that we do feel good about getting in there. So I think that I think that the development so far, I'm really excited about what's coming, and there's not a lot of things I actually get excited about on Planning Commission, but this is exciting, what they're proposing, I think. And the last thing I would want to do is to stymie that process, because I feel like they're doing a lot of things right. But again, I feel like it might just be a way for us to be able to think about other programs that we have, to be able to think in a more targeted way about how we can try, as a commission, to support the process of looking for opportunities to really deal with some of the issues with Allen Creek.
Was the tree line an opportunity to kind of work simultaneously on multiple things?
Yeah, to a certain extent, though, I think it has more to do with general stormwater issues. Yeah, and as of right now, the tree line is really like using, it right now, as it's proposed, mostly using existing pavement infrastructure that's there. And there are some places where they're going to be able to add small amounts of water quality treatment, but nothing that would be a comprehensive, like, wow, we could really change this with that. That's my sense of it.
Thinking mainly as an opportunity for education.
Yes, yeah, certainly, right, yep, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So has there ever been a report generated about how to mitigate some of the concerns about Allen Creek, or?
I think,
Well, the Huron River Watershed Council has all kinds of things on this.
yeah,
Great maps and resources and what you can do and all that kind of stuff. So the city might have things too, but I know the Watershed Council has wonderful resources on it.
so it may just be some more concerted effort on our part to be able to think about some targeted ways that we might be able to really, I don't know, what it is, if, it's all open right now. I'm bringing it up, and I guess I would just say that I'm grateful for the metrics effort that happened, because I feel like this is the kind of thing that it can help feed, so that we can actually say there's data on these things, and here's the way that we want to try to move the needle so that we can make things better in targeted areas where we want to focus our attention.
It starts with awareness, and now we're
That's
aware.
right. You're right, exactly, right.
Thanks. Commissioner Appel, any news from Parks? No? Commissioner Mursky, Energy?
Yes, brief update on energy. The last meeting, energy meeting, was devoted almost entirely to a report out from Honeywell on an energy efficiency audit that they did of city municipal buildings. Just the summary that was shown to us, and there's a whole binder, but just it alone was 40 slides, so it's rather in-depth. What Honeywell essentially did is they went through each one of the facilities, looked for opportunities for energy efficiency savings, and their interest is not just ending with that. Their interest is in coming to agreement with the city on a contract to essentially address all of those energy optimization opportunities, to do that basically on their dime, and then to essentially reap savings from that, where essentially we share those savings with them. And on the surface, their contracts look rather attractive, but the total savings, approximately 60% come from assumed operational savings, only about 40% come from actual reduction in energy costs, meaning if something is done where light bulbs are put in, LED light bulbs instead of incandescent or inefficient old fluorescent light bulbs, you get a certain amount of energy savings, but the new LED light bulbs don't need to be replaced as often. And therefore, there's labor cost savings in having to go around and replace the bulbs. So that's in the operational savings. And those amount to 60% of the total savings. So our belief is in the Energy Commission that those operational savings are very, very optimistic, that actually the city would not really save anywhere close to that amount, and therefore the payback in contracting with Honeywell would not be as advantageous as the way they're presenting it. Obviously, they have an interest in making money off of this too, so there's a certain amount of profit built into this as well. So there have been a group of us that have been meeting regularly with Honeywell, sort of behind the scenes. As I said, they presented this summary in our last meeting, and the Energy Commission is going to look at developing a response, if you will, to an analysis of the final Honeywell report out, and some alternatives that we think are more viable and have a greater payback to the city. In the end, we could go with Honeywell if our analysis is not going to be as favorable as what we think, but we think that there will be better alternatives. So the meeting was basically developed ran around that particular report out. Just two other comments on energy-related ordinances that we're working on. I think I've reported on these before. We're working on a lighting ordinance, and we're working on a time of marketing, meaning at the time the single-family residence would go on the market, that there would be a requirement of a rather high-level energy audit that would be conducted on the home, that would generate a home energy score, and that would be then included in the MLS listing, so that the buyer would get information about the energy efficiency of the home on a score, on a rating of basically 0 to 10. And that would then correspond also with some anticipated utility costs, with the idea that the homeowner, in getting information about opportunities to improve the energy efficiency of the home, would make some of those improvements before the home went on up for sale, and or that the buyer then would be aware of what energy efficiency opportunities there are and would make those at the time of the purchase and wrap that up into the mortgage, for example, where you get a very, very low rate and where you could finance new windows or insulation or whatever the case may be. In the case of both the lighting and the time of market ordinances. There are other ordinances like this that have been implemented around the country, so we are using those as templates. In the case of lighting, there are a number of different ordinances in the state of Minnesota, Arizona, Pennsylvania. In the case of time of market, that's being done in Austin, Texas, and in Portland, Oregon. So we're using those templates as best practices and their lessons learned. We have teams formed. There are regular meetings that are now happening. We're setting up Google Documents folders so that we can go in and collectively provide comments on draft resolutions or draft ordinances, I should say, that are being developed. The timetable for the lighting ordinance is we're targeting implementation, meaning approval by council in the latter part of the first half of next year, where the ordinance would go into effect roughly in July. We've also identified stakeholder groups in both cases where we want to make sure that we talk with and reach out to those stakeholder groups. In the case, for example, of the time of marketing, we've already met with 3 representatives from the Realtors Association, including the incoming president. So we're very much aware that this is not something that we want to do in public meetings, but with no stakeholders there, we actually want to reach out to stakeholders, involve them, and so hopefully we would be able to meet that timing. On the lighting, like I said, July, roughly July of next year. We haven't set yet a target date for the time of market, but we are using what we've done from the lighting side, and we'll put together a similar timetable for that ordinance as well. That probably won't be quite on the same timetable. That's probably sometime in the second half of next year. So those are the things that we're working on. Yes?
One question. Will that ordinance also take into account water bills and also stormwater assessments?
Only energy. So we're not looking at other types of utilities, only gas and electric. That was your question, right?
It is.
Yes.
Is there a reason why? Is that just because that's the focus of the Energy Commission?
Well, yes, partly, and also because, for example, I mean, you can say the same thing to some degree with water, but water is, for example, going to be very dependent on the owner and what they're doing in terms of watering plants and things like that. So we can get good data. And the home energy score, by the way, that we're using, which is a DOE-approved methodology and score, that is what we're going to generate and use in the MLS, or what we're recommending, and that only focuses on energy-related utility costs, so not water or stormwater or things like that. But that could be an opportunity, and that might be something that this group, which is more focused on water kinds of issues, maybe could look at some point in time.
Well, it's publicly available information. Well, I guess it's not necessarily publicly available, but the
It's
information's
available.
already out there and
Correct.
quantified.
Yes.
If we were passing an ordinance that was designed to be able to give a future buyer the full environmental impact of the house, it might be something that we would want to encourage them thinking about. Just in terms of, simply for the case of developing environmentally literate citizens.
True. I made a note, include water question mark, water sewer, and that's something we could think about. Yep, thanks. And by the way, we're starting with single family. It's, as I said, it's easier because there's already best practices and templates out there from other municipalities, but we would eventually like to move into multifamily with some type of ordinance there potentially as well. It's a lot more difficult, and it may be something that is, instead of tied to a listing, something that's tied to inspections. And we'd also eventually like to move into the commercial space, but that could be a couple of years out or something like that. But we essentially, what we want to do is, though, increase awareness and have an incentive for people to make energy efficiency upgrades. Thank you.
And this discussion prompts me to re-look again at that EPA, what's my carbon footprint calculator?
Right.
which gets into the nitty-gritty of your Energy Star appliances and things like that.
For yourself as an individual, yeah, or in your household, yeah.
Yes, and I think at the public library, we also have some different devices to measure what your refrigerator using and all that. So I'm glad, it's exciting, all this is coming together.
Did you want to talk about this listening tour idea?
Oh, yes, I did. Thank you. Yeah. The Energy Commission, or a subset of energy commissioners came up with the idea, actually it started with Commissioner Clevey, with the idea that there would be a listening tour, sustainability listening tour, that would hold a series of meetings in each one of the wards, where we would go out and, for example, meet at a district library branch or some other public space, indicate to residents that we commissioners from both the energy as well as environmental, so the idea is to have roughly 3 to 4 commissioners representing both commissions present, hopefully also in attendance with people from the Office of Sustainability and Innovation, at least a representative, and to simply engage with residents from every one of the wards to hear what their concerns are relative to environmental sustainability. So if you look at the sustainability framework that the city has, there's 16 goals under 4 theme areas. One of those is community, and that includes things like economic development, education, serious crime, things like that. We would not focus on that theme area, but the other theme areas are very much related to energy, climate, environment, clean water, things like that. And the focus of the sustainability tour would be to focus on those areas and get input from residents where their concerns are, where they think the commissions need to put more focus, where we maybe potentially even solutions and things like that, just to have an opportunity, other than in meetings like this where we're actually going out to people in their neighborhoods and get input on their concerns and hopes and desires for the city. So the idea is it's in a white paper form. Up until now, it's been circulating only among a few people in the Energy Commission, along with Missy and people in her office. And the idea would be then to send that out in hopefully the next couple of days once we are at a 90% draft to commissioners from the Environmental Commission, and then hopefully to get support, well, first of all, input on how to improve the proposal, and if it's supported, then to actually start with meetings potentially already at the end of this year. That may be difficult with the holidays, but at the very latest, say in January of next year. And that would be different than the sustainability forums that are held at the downtown library, which are much more scripted, where we have typically panelists that are presenting on a particular topic, autonomous vehicles, whatever the case, with some Q&A at the end. This would really truly be a listening tour as opposed to a presentation tour. Thanks.
So we can look forward to seeing a copy of the proposal in the coming days?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Reports from our council representatives. Councilmember Smith, anything?
Why don't we start with
Let's see. Well, I know there's been a lot of hoopla, or whatever you'd call it, a lot of concern since the October 15th meeting, the 8-hour meeting, by the way. And I would say, yeah, it's been hard to please everyone with that process that we used. I think the good news is that there is a strong appetite amongst council members and incoming council members to support the, in particular, the solar, net zero on the solar and electric vehicle chargers and things. Dr. Stoltz, I'm sorry I got your email. Thank you. I haven't had time to first ply yet, but you've been on my to-do list, and so I think the concerns, I know a lot of you were disappointed, I think the concerns had to do with it being a budget amendment outside of the budget process, and also that the new council is just coming on board, and so that some of those process concerns. But I just sort of wanted to tell you all that there's a lot of enthusiasm for the Office of Sustainability and Innovation and the exciting work that they can do, and collaborating with U of M on their new plan. And I liked, Dr. Stokes refers to being a disruptor / advisor, and I think there's a huge appetite for that, and I think people are looking forward to the communications that can come out of the office, and helping all of the departments of the city improve and get up to speed and the role model that we want to be. So I'm happy to take any questions on that, but I think the good news is that this is just beginning, and a lot of the momentum that was created this month is going to be used for all of us going forward. And so that's just what I wanted to say about that. And if that wasn't clear, or if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to hear them. Mike?
Yeah, with all this enthusiasm, what was your vote on this?
Because of my vote was no on this, as you may recall, and that was partly because of it being a budget amendment and the new council coming on board. And my understanding is that the voters spoke on August 7 when they elected this, and they would like for the new council to look at how we do this. But I want how we do our sustainability and innovation. But I want to reassure everyone that my understanding is there's a huge appetite that we do this and do these things, and we just want to do them in the right process and after a more thorough discussion. So I believe it's back on the agenda for November 19. So I know the new council, I speak with them daily. They are getting ready for that discussion.
Chip?
Yeah, I think the 15th was disappointing to everybody here that voted affirmatively to support that funding amendment. I was certainly quite disappointed. I postponed it so that it wouldn't be struck down, in the hopes that the incoming council would perhaps feel a bit differently and we could perhaps muster 8 votes. But I'm not confident that 8 votes are there. I would just remind all of us to continue to advocate for this. You know, the work can't get done without people here to do it. The appetite to do this, if we're not going to fund it, then we don't really have an appetite to do it. So I think to continue to call all of us out at council for our inability to get together and act on this is fair. I think it's something that the community has expressed considerable interest in. I'm very interested in the listening tour that the Energy Commission is talking about. When I talk to folks, this is, this and affordable housing are the 2 most important things that I hear. And we have not made any progress on either of these things. And it's frustrating, and I'm very hopeful that the new council will be able to work collaboratively to find solutions that work for everybody. But until we actually, put pen to paper and start funding this stuff, we're just talking a good game.
So I think many people know my thoughts of this, at least on the Energy Commission. I missed some of the meetings because I was out of town when the resolution was being drafted in the joint meetings, both the working session as well as the final one. preceding the city council meeting. But what I would encourage council to consider is in my view, it's not just this resolution, which is for fiscal year 19 budget, but you will be working on the fiscal year 2021 budget. And in my view, that will really reveal what is council's appetite for climate and I'll say environmental sustainability in general. And if you look at funding the Office of Sustainability or its, let's say, roots the last several years, the funding has been minuscule for programs. So we've had a few people where we've paid for their compensation, including benefits. They've been able to do outreach and education, but they haven't been able to do any kind of community-facing programs or anything else. So I think the new council will truly reveal how important it is, how important environmental sustainability is, not only in the vote next month, but in the final budget that evolves. And if it really is a priority, then we will see that. And what I'd like to point out, and I've made or quoted these figures in other forums, so how do I say, excuse me for if I'm repeating it here, but the total city budget is roughly $400 million. So that's general fund and all the other funds. That's what total city expenditures are. Total expenditures for climate action is around, and this is something that I've clarified with both Missy as well as Dr. Stoltz, as well as Tom Crawford. Climate action related spending, including staff working on that, is around $560,000, which works out to 0.15% of total city expenditures. So if we look at everything the city is doing and we look at the priorities, my hope would be that out of 400 million, there's more than 0.15% that is directed towards climate action, given the impact of climate action on so many different things: food security, watershed and ecosystem health, and so many other different things. So my hope is that indeed council approves at least some of the expenditures for fiscal year 19, but then also follows that up with spending in fiscal year 20 and 21 and beyond, because we can't have effective programs if we fund them with $1.5 million in a 2-year cycle, and then it goes down to 500,000, and then it goes back up and down. The kinds of things that we need to really do to address environmental sustainability in general, and in particular climate action, requires relatively stable funding so that we can have stable programs, we can have stable staff, and so on and so forth. Thank you for the opportunity to opine on the subject.
Anyone else have comments? Did you have anything else, Councilmember Bannister?
Well, I just wanted to, I'm a big person on like communications and education. And so, as I stated on the 15th, that I really think, and I'm not trying to scold people or school lecture people, but I really think that our pie chart that says the municipality is 2% of our community's greenhouse gas emissions, the other 98% is us and what we do in businesses and the university and such. So I think those sort of, there's a lot of, we don't need to be sitting on our laurels and waiting for, not that any of us were, but I look forward to communicating to the public about how we can all monitor our own carbon footprints.
Councilmember Smith, did you have anything else? The only thing I was going to mention as chair was we will be considering at our next meeting adopting bylaws which include a requirement to adopt an annual work plan, which will then mean we really need to adopt an annual work plan, which we've done only sporadically in the past. with that in mind, a couple meetings ago, I think I asked for suggestions from all of you on topic areas that we might address in the coming months, and I got a few responses, and thank you for those. However, listing all of them, we end up with sort of a list of basically everything that we might possibly consider, which is of limited usefulness when trying to sit down and come up with a list of things that we might actually do. So I think that was probably the wrong question to ask. So tonight I'm going to ask if everyone could just think a little bit about particular actions that the commission might take in the coming year, things that we might specifically tackle. I think we've already heard a couple possibilities tonight as far as the Allen Creek situation. You know, if everybody could just give some thought to specific ordinances that we might tackle, specific policy changes we might recommend in the coming year, and funnel those to me, and we can talk further about things that we might do. But really like to see us make some substantial progress in the coming year. In particular, I'd ask if we can think about things that would improve the metrics behind our 16 sustainability goals. I think it'd be great if we all look back at those and see where we're at and try to come up with some ideas that would start those numbers getting moving in the right direction. And I think we'll have a good year ahead if we can do that. Next item is a report from staff. Dr. Stultz, do you have anything?
Yeah, we have a lot, so sorry to do this at the end. I feel bad. Excuse me. Just to let you know, we were awarded a gold award from the Michigan Green Communities for the commitment that our council made to 100% clean and renewable energy for municipal operations. It's a beautiful poster in my office if you'd like to see it. I just wanted to call out how happy we are for the University of Michigan moving forward with their commitment to pursuing carbon neutrality, and I think that's extraordinary. We look forward to partnering with them, and we have been reaching out to the university to explore opportunities. Certainly great leverage, and I can foresee a future in which we similarly make such a commitment and then unlock potential together. Excuse me, I absolutely have like a tickle in my throat, so I'm sorry. I also wanted to let you know that you may remember Emily mentioned we had won a grant to bring in an equity advisor to look at our programs. And we have started working with Dr. Tony Reams at the university. He's already scanned the work plan that you have seen, and it's gone to council. Given suggestions, he has signed off and helped us really think about how we implement that to make sure the needs of our most vulnerable populations are front and center. His next task is to look at our 2012 climate action plan and identify missed opportunities. And we're going to be using that, and you'll get a report. He's going to, we put it in his work plan to come to you and share what he has found through that. We also have asked him to create a process that's replicable for other departments so they can similarly start thinking about equity and how it integrates into the work that they're doing. So we're pretty excited about how that unfolds. And I would say when we think about sustainability, for us, it's very important that we're people-centric and remembering those living on the margins. So that's pretty key for our staff. Just some kind of random things all over that staff shared. Next year, we're part of something called the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. It's about 240 municipalities that are really actively pursuing sustainability. And it looks like next year's meeting is going to be in Detroit, which we're pretty excited about. So we're going to try to steal them over here to Ann Arbor, show some of what we got, bring in some thought leaders. And so stay tuned. You're going to see, I hope, a lot of community events with some of these folks doing really great things around the nation. We also have been asked by peers to host them. A group of cities have reached out based on our rental housing program. And you may remember in the work plan, we've got an opportunity. We'd like to pursue a green rental housing program where we try to make all of our rentals as efficient as possible without raising rents for, again, our vulnerable populations. And we're able to think about that because we have a really strong rental housing program. And so others who want to do something similar, like a green rental housing program, they have to set up a rental housing program first to do inspections and make sure those positions are, or those offices are staffed and operating. And so we actually had a group of cities reach out to us. So we're going to put in an application to host them, and I'm pretty excited. So good job for all of our colleagues in community services. They're doing great work. We also have two proposals. I'm at the halfway point. You guys are doing great. Two proposals into something called the Innovation Fund, which is through the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. One is to explore a resilience finance facility And the thought there is resilience as the climate continues changing. How are we going to fund the massive amount of work for stormwater or for heat mitigation? I mean, where's that money going to come from? And so we've got a national finance person who is a city person by trade who's working with us on that proposal. So we've raised our hand to be a guinea pig, working with our finance department to figure out what that might look like. And then we put in a proposal for some additional seed funding for resilience hubs. And this is a little tricky because we have to demonstrate we're committed to a resilience hub in order to unlock this extra funding, but we're going to proceed. And this is in the work plan. If anyone has questions, let me know. You heard the budget amendment was moved to November 19th, and we are preparing a short executive summary of our work plan that we'll be sharing with council, especially since we have so many new council members stepping forward. And it outlines the greenhouse gas reduction potential of every measure, which we had, the cost of every measure, the cost per ton of CO2, and then a slew of other benefits. So is this an equity-driven project? Is this a project that has water quality benefits, et cetera? So that'll be a short summary, and we'll obviously share that with you in the public just to kind of promote the work plan. Bryant Community Center is moving forward with a 6 kilowatt PV installation, and by the time you meet again, it'll be on. So we have helped finance that, and we're pretty excited. On September 17th, we sent our strategy for the 100% clean and renewables for city operations to council, and that was well received. And so now we're running at that to try to get municipal operations off as close as we can to zero emissions as possible. Just to point out, though, our work plan, the bigger thing that we went to council for is for mostly community programs, community-facing programs. So this is something we're working on very much internal. And then 2 sort of calls for those who are interested. There's something called the National Climate Assessment that is released. It's mandated by the federal government to come out every 5 years, and they are about to release the next one. We expect it to have very little fanfare. Incredibly little fanfare from our federal administration. There was a chapter, a science chapter that's like the build into this that was released on Friday at 4 o'clock. And we expect this to be a very similar kind of release because they don't want to draw attention, we would argue, to climate change. So we are raising our hands to host a really big launch party because we have a lot of authors in the area. So if anyone wants to help me make a little splash and draw some attention to climate change and the state of the science, would welcome that help. We don't know when it's going to drop because it's being really kept. It's very tight to the chest. It's going to be December or January, but we're mobilizing some folks. And then the last opportunity actually comes from the Energy Commission, and there are subcommittees, as Commissioner Mirsky mentioned, and they have offered if you want to serve on one of those subcommittees and help advance things, they would welcome that. So if you are interested, please let John, myself, or Josh McDonald know. It's the EV ordinance, so EV readiness throughout the community is one, the time of marketing, and then the 100% clean and renewable strategy. So if you're interested, please follow. That's all.
Any questions for Dr. Stoltz? Do you know of any news on the Gelman-Plume negotiations? No.
I don't have any updates on that, but I can certainly make sure it's included in your next meeting.
We're always interested.
You got it.
And I think on the plume, that because it's in litigation, and Commissioner Smith might want to weigh in on this, but I think it's just in litigation chugging along in the background, and we're not even talking about it.
We've had a couple of closed sessions, so we can't share any of that information, but it is the discussions we understand are ongoing.
Thanks. Does anyone have any items for the next agenda? We already have several things, so expect we'll be busy. Would anyone from the public like to make any closing comments? Please come forward and tell us your name, and we'd ask that you confine it to 3 minutes, but we'd ask that you confine it to 3 minutes.
I don't know, do I hit anything or just?
No, just speaking to the
Okay, never done this before. Okay, my name's Kristen Hayden. I'm a student at the University of Michigan, and I've been a resident of Ann Arbor for the last 19 years. So this is my town, this is my home. And I'd just like to commend you guys for the work you're doing, but also ask that you continue to push as hard as you can, because I'm going to be living through this hopefully for the rest of my life. Hopefully it'll be a long time. Hopefully climate change will be mitigated as soon as possible. And I'd also like to ask on behalf of the student groups that I'm part of that you consider students in your movements forward. We're really interested in getting hands-on experience, both politically, scientifically. with you guys, working with the city of Ann Arbor and other community partners. So I was talking with John, he has my contact info, and so if you have any ideas, any thoughts, I would love to work with you guys. And so thank you so much. That's all I have to say, but yeah, good work.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Anyone have anything else? Councilmember Smith.
I sent an email to the city administrator earlier today asking for a work session dedicated, a city council work session dedicated to climate change and local response. You know, by my reckoning, and Councilmember Bannister, you might know better than I, we don't have a free work session period until January, which is unfortunate, but I think, you know, that gets us set up for the run-up to the budget discussions. It might be a very appropriate time to do that. I'll double back and let you know what he says about that. Generally, you know, staff determines what's going to be the topic of each of our work sessions unless we ask for something in particular. So I'm hoping that we could dedicate, you know, 2 hours of our time to having a pretty detailed discussion, not just of the Office of Sustainability and Innovation's work plan, but more to have some experts that we have access to here at the university come in and talk about what the difference our local actions can make in the broader efforts to mitigate climate change.
Great. Anything else? All right. Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned at 8:27.